Hi, today we're going to have a discussion around calculating backlog or crew weeks in backlog anyhow. So how big is the backlog? How much time will it take to work through that work? So we get a lot of questions around backlog measurements and things like aging of work orders. We're going to avoid all that just for a second. We're going to talk very specifically about crew weeks of backlog. So crew weeks of backlog, a healthy backlog is considered 4 weeks plus or minus a week. So anywhere 3 to 5 weeks of backlog is considered healthy. What's a week of backlog mean? Well, when we calculate crew weeks of backlog, we look at the total hours that exist in the backlog, and we divide that by the number of technicians and what they usually get paid for in terms of hours. So this may be 40 hours a week in some plants, it may be 37 and a half hours in others. Depending on how it's structured and what they get paid for lunch or not paid for. So we need to know what that number is. So it's total techs times how many hours do they get paid in a given week. So for the calculation example, we've got 2,000 hours of backlog divided by 20 technicians times 40 hours a week each. So that essentially is 2,000 divided by 800 or 2.5 weeks of backlog. Essentially what the calculation means is if no more work came into the plant, how long would it take me to get all the work done? Now, why is backlog important? So a lot of plants say, well, we don't have enough people, and there's a lot of answers I can give to that, but the basic one I ask generally is, how do you know? The basic question I ask is, how do you know you don't have enough people? And folks say, well, we have a big backlog. And let's kind of walk through that a little bit. So that's great, you have a big backlog. And this is time. Oh, that's a terrible T. Let's redo that. Sorry for my sideways sitting. And this is weeks. So let's say this is 10 weeks, this is 5 weeks, and we're saying we want folks around the 4 number, right? This is where we want to see folks. Well, let's say your backlog is here. But over time, it's pretty steady. If your backlog is steady, you don't need more people. Now, you may need to bring in some people to get it down to 4, but it's steady, it's not growing. If it's not growing, you don't need more people. You're handling this level of incoming work. The trouble is you've got a bunch of past work you haven't gotten to. So you can bring in extra resources or work some overtime to get the backlog down. Once it's down, you're still in a steady state. So you don't need more people. Now, what if your backlog is doing this? If your backlog is doing this over time, you've got too many people. The only scenario here where you need more people is if your backlog is going in this direction. If your backlog is steadily growing, you're not handling the influx of work. And this can be due to additional production lines coming into the plant, resources that may have left and didn't get replaced. There's a variety of reasons why this may be occurring. So essentially, keep an eye on your trend. Trend your crew weeks in backlog, and that will determine whether or not you have enough staff to adequately get the work done as it's coming in.